Good morning. My name is Adriana Link, and I am the Assistant Director of Library and Museum Programming here at the American Philosophical Society. I am truly delighted to welcome all of you here to today's conference on Women in Science Opportunities, which is the second, if you're unaware, of two conferences that have been hosted by the Society this year, exploring the past, present, and future work of women scientists. So our first conference, let's see, I think a few folks were here. Anybody in the room here for the first conference? Okay, a couple people. Our first conference, which was on achievements and barriers for women in science, all of those recordings are now on the Society's YouTube channel. So if you're interested, after today's conversation, going back and hearing some of those discussions, I encourage you to do so. For those of you who were able to attend last night's performance know, and also given the recent news coverage of Catalina Nobel Prize, the achievements of women in science, as well as the many obstacles that they have faced, remain significant topics for public discourse. And I'm really excited today to bring together a truly interdisciplinary group of educators, library and museum professionals, scientists, scholars, and others who will offer their perspectives on some of the opportunities and continued challenges for women who are working in STEM fields, as well as some of the ways that we might make this work more visible. So today's conference, if you haven't already picked up on this, is also inspired by the APS's current museum exhibition, Pursuit and Persistence, 300 Years of Women in Science, which is now open kind of cat-a-corner across the street through the end of December. So if you're here joining us in person, or if you plan to join us later, there will be time during the lunch break today to go over and look at the exhibition. And if you're able to stay throughout the whole program, the closing reception for today's event will actually take place in Philosophical Hall, which is where the museum is located, and there'll be time to look at the exhibition there as well. And there's a map on your physical program of where all of these buildings are. Everybody thinks the APS is one building, but we actually have a lot of buildings, and it gets very confusing. So before I introduce today's first session, I have a couple of housekeeping points. Let's see if this works. Great, fantastic. So today's conference is a truly hybrid event. So in addition to those joining in person, the event is also being live streamed. So hello, thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning, or wherever you are. Those of you who are joining remotely, you're welcome and encouraged to put in your questions in Boxcast. There'll be time for conversation, discussion, Q&A after each of the panels, so please go ahead and put those questions in the chat. We want to hear from you. You're also welcome to join us online on social media, and folks in the room as well. The hashtag for the event today is APS Women in STEM, and that'll also link up with the conversations from the conference in June. For those joining in person, there will be lunch after the second panel, and that'll be served in the room at the front, as well as other refreshments provided during the day. There should be a restaurant list in the front too, so if you want to get out and get a breath of fresh air and get lunch, there's suggestions there. Bathrooms, very important. So there's bathrooms in the middle hallway here. If you go through the doors, they'll be on your left. It's a women's room. And then downstairs, there's a men's room and an additional women's room as well. Wi-Fi, additional important part of information. As you see here, the Wi-Fi connection is APS guest, and the password is Franklin with a capital F 1743. And I should say it is a big day for Franklin here in Philadelphia. It's the 300th anniversary of Franklin landing at Penn's Landing. So if you see a lot of hubbub outside, that's what's going on. There might be some Franklin impersonators walking around. So normal day in Philadelphia. It's fine. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce our first panel, and I'll invite folks to come up now. You can see, I think this is actually the biggest panel we've ever had on this stage, so I'm thrilled, and maybe half the audience. So if you want to come up, and I'll introduce our moderator, who will introduce the rest of the speakers. So our first panel today is on local opportunities, engaging women in STEM in Philadelphia. And leading us in this pursuit is Dr. Jaqueline, who is Director of Science Content and Chief Bioscientist at the Franklin Institute. She has led the development of several exhibitions at the Institute, including Your Brain, a national award-winning exhibit about the neuroscience and psychology of the human brain. She also serves as executive producer of the So Curious podcast and directs programming initiatives to advance informal science education about vaccines, material science, neuroethics, and other areas of emerging science and their societal impact. So please join me in welcoming Jaqueline and the rest of today's panelists.
Good morning. I'd like to thank Adriana and the organizers for inviting me to moderate this first panel on local opportunities for women in STEM. Philadelphia has a long and rich history of science, beginning with Ben Franklin and his fellow members of the APS, to the eds and meds that anchor our economy today. And my own story is tied to science in Philadelphia because my parents immigrated here and settled here because of the opportunities in the STEM industry, and the weekends that we spent at the science museums around town surely played a role in guiding me to where I am today. But Philadelphia's history and my individual experience here notwithstanding, our city is not immune to the systemic inequities and personal challenges that women face across STEM fields. But luckily, as we will hear from our panelists today, we also have a vibrant ecosystem of training and support systems for women that is helping them navigate these challenges and hopefully changing the landscape of science for women in the future. We're going to hear about 4 types of experiences that nurture leadership, mentorship, and scholarship at different career stages through different methodologies. But the final element that unites these experiences is their focus on building community. And so I'll be interested to explore what community means in each of these contexts, what benefits does it bring to individuals, as well as to the broader enterprise of STEM. And so as we learn about these programs, we can think about the opportunities and challenges that emerge from being local, to using place-based approaches, to growing the diversity, inclusion, and visibility of women in STEM. What aspects of working locally can we leverage for success? What elements might be unique, and what can we scale up? So to begin exploring these questions, let me introduce our first speaker, who will talk about exploring 40+ years of women in STEM through the Women in Natural Sciences program. I'm pleased to introduce Jaqueline Genovesi, who's the Executive Director for the Center for STEAM Equity. She's an informal science museum practitioner, researcher, and developer of STEM curricula and programs for diverse public audiences, from early childhood to high school students to adults and teachers. Her work with Philadelphia's high school girls caps a 41-year institutional commitment to young women in natural science, or WINS, at the Academy of Natural Sciences, a program that was awarded the prestigious Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring. Jackie's joining us virtually, but her colleagues, Janae Kita and Kimberly Godfrey, are also here to answer questions and take part in the discussion. So thank you both for being here, and Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that lovely welcome, and I apologize for having to be virtual. As a woman in STEM, I'm constantly balancing life and professional obligations, so I am in Massachusetts with my son on college tour, but I'm kind of glad I am doing this balancing act. Because I was lucky enough to see a talk by Dr. Prescott Weinstein last night at Clark University, and she reminded me of something that I'd like to start my presentation out with today. And I'm quoting her from her talk last night, believe it or not, on dark matter, that Black people have always done science. We don't need to be introduced. We need to be given the resources that were taken from us so that we can keep doing what we have always been doing. And she said with her talk that it was really important to frame what we do in that way. And I wholeheartedly agree with her, and I thank her for reminding me of why we do this work. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it has been disabled by the host. I need the permission to share my screen for my talk. Thank you. So this morning, we're going to talk about the Women in Natural Sciences program. basically known as WINS to our students and faculty in Philadelphia. And I'm here just to talk a little bit about the opportunities that we have in WINS and how we hope to increase the diversity within the STEM field. So what is WINS? Women in Natural Sciences is a program that was started about 41 years ago now for young women, particularly young women who have really been exposed and marginalized away from some of the opportunities in STEM. And it's a after-school program that started off as a one-year program of science enrichment, and that over the last 40 years has actually turned into a program that supports young women from the School District of Philadelphia throughout their 4 years in high school, now with support from GSK throughout their 4 years in college, and even through adulthood, we'll see, through the WINS sisterhood. So it is a science enrichment program, it's a college and career exploration program, and most importantly, it's a positive youth development program. Throughout our 41 years, approximately 1,000 young women from the School District of Philadelphia have participated in the WINS program. So when we say WINS, what do we mean? So WINS encompasses a lot. The first year, what we call WINS 1, starts out as rising ninth graders in an intensive summer program where young women come to the academy 3 days a week, also participate in workshops and field trips throughout the community of Philadelphia. It moves into WINS 2, which covers the rest of their time in high school. And then throughout the 40 years of WINS, we've been doing other sort of programs. And as I go through the talk today, we'll introduce you to those other programs that we've sort of infused into our core WINS program. So WINS 1. WINS 1 begins the summer following 8th grade, where we love to just get our young women involved in everything STEM that you can find around Philadelphia. And if you were anything like me in high school, in the town that you grew up in, you didn't realize how much there was just within a few blocks of your house or a few miles of your house. And so for WINS 1, that's what we're doing. We're studying science concepts, and we're introducing young women to what is around them in their own city, focusing on the interconnectedness of science and community needs, and really just giving our young women a chance to explore all of the amazing opportunities that Philadelphia has. And then once that summer is done, sort of introducing all of the different STEM concepts, we pivot to what the Academy has itself. So those of you who may not be familiar with the Academy of Natural Sciences, the Academy of Natural Sciences was founded in 1812. We're one of the oldest natural history museums, in fact, the oldest natural history museum in the Americas. And we have this amazing collection of biodiversity. We also have researchers in evolution and the aquatic sciences. And so throughout their time in WINS, our young women are being exposed to lots of different careers within the natural sciences, and also lots of different mentors through our scientists and other people that work with our collections and through our research. When our young women have sort of graduated from their WINS 1 and WINS 2 experience, one of the things that we pride ourselves in is really just the expansive amount of different STEM careers and different STEM opportunities. So a young woman who graduates through WINS will have participated in at least 100 STEM lessons and workshops. And in addition to those STEM lessons and workshops, we also have a Love Yourself series, because in addition to just the science and the content, what we found through our 40 years is just as important as that, it's also taking care of yourself and learning the self-care that you need to really be able to survive and thrive in a STEM field. They also go on 40 different field trips, both within Philadelphia and expanding out into the tri-state region and even further up on our college tours. And everyone participates in this 5-day PEAK trip. For those of you who don't know, PEAK is our Poconos Environmental Education Center. And it's a great place to take young students and even adults for team building and really getting out into the environment. And then most importantly, or at least as important as our other things, is by the time they graduate, they'll have talked to over 100 STEM professionals. And what we found with WINS is that when young women start in WINS, there's a very narrow sort of focus on what it means to be in STEM, what it means to be a scientist. And so by exposing students to lots of different STEM professionals, we sort of open up what are the opportunities. Like, you know, many people like myself, I was pre-med in college because no one ever told me there was something besides a doctor to be in science. And then I was exposed to all these other science careers and social sciences, and that I could be a researcher in lots of different things. So some of our achievements. So WINS graduates, 100% of our young women graduate high school. I'm hoping this will soon be a statistic for all of the school district of Philadelphia. 97% of our students enroll in a secondary institution, whether that be a 2-year or a 4-year. And what we are most proud of is that over 60% of our young women will pursue STEM majors. So what is WINS in our students' own words? So my experience in WINS completely changed my outlook on the field and the subject of science. WINS has allowed me to experience a world that was beyond my means. It has broadened my horizons. I think WINS support in college would have gone a long way. I would have been put in the right position to stay in the environmental sciences. And this quote is one of many that actually made us really think about, wait, why is WINS only a 4-year program? We really do need to support our young women into the college years. And then additional counseling when it was time to select courses and understand a major, and sometimes just a hug or a monthly gathering with all your WINS sisters. Once again, speaking to the WINS sisterhood and the need to really keep those connections. So in addition to our WINS 1 and WINS 2 programs, we've also expanded out to engineering WINS, WINS 3, and then a little bit about our future endeavors that we are doing right now. So engineering WINS is a program that started with an NSF grant about 4 years ago, when we really realized that the number of young women, especially Black and brown young women in engineering, has really stagnated at a very low number. So right now there's about 4% of engineering degrees being given to young women, especially young women of color. And so we decided, how could we partner with the College of Engineering, since we were now part of Drexel University, to help infuse an engineering WINS curriculum into our program. And what we really strived to do was not just put engineering in to put engineering in, but to really put engineering in with a WINS sort of personality, shall we say, to make sure that the engineering we were introducing to our young women was something that was culturally relevant to them, that rang true with the values of WINS. And so we introduced WINS to engineering in a natural science way, in a way that was really welcoming to young women, to hopefully encourage some of our WINS students to be able to think about engineering as a career. And part of that program was developing a set of micro-credentials to really train our engineering mentors that welcomed our young women into their laboratories to make sure that engineering was a welcoming space. In addition to our engineering WINS, I talked about briefly that WINS has expanded into the college years. And Janae, who runs that program for us, can tell you a little bit more about that in the question and answers if you have any specific questions. The beautiful thing about Janae sitting on our panel too is she's a WINS alum. And so she can talk about WINS 3 from both the programmatic side as the professional who runs it, but also from the alumnus side and what that means to the WINS alumna to have this support through their college years. And basically for us, it really is just a series of workshops, but more importantly, WINS 3 is keeping that WINS sisterhood alive and basically making space for WINS students who are in college now, facing all of those systemic barriers that we talked about in the beginning in the introduction, that many women in STEM, but especially Black and brown women in STEM, face in college. And how do we help our women build the resilience to be able to face those barriers and really thrive in college? And so that's the main purpose of our WINS 3 program, in addition to making sure that young Black and Latinx women have paid internships in STEM. A lot of times we'll offer free internships, and many of our students just can't avail themselves to not having a paid position while in college. And then finally, over the 40 years of implementation, and I think the thing that we are most excited about as a WINS team is we've done lots of evaluation and a little bit of research on what are the impacts of WINS and what are the specific support that women of color, especially from low-income backgrounds, may need. And what you see on the screen here are just sort of an overarching theme from a pilot study that we have done on what our WINS students really needed and what they say they need. But what we're really excited about with WINS right now is just last year we received a 5-year research grant from NSF to actually do a controlled comparative study of young women who interviewed to get into WINS but were not accepted because we only have 25 spots a year, comparing them with the life outcomes of women who did participate in the WINS study. And it will be the first national controlled study of the life outcomes. And we're looking at women who graduated the program between 1995 and 2015. So these are women who are already in their STEM careers, to see what these outcomes are and how out of school time STEM opportunities may contribute to those outcomes. So that is the WINS program, 41 years in a very short 15-minute. And I will apologize, I have to actually hop off to go take my son to his college tour. But Kimberly and Janae are here to answer questions. So I leave you in very capable hands. And I thank you for allowing us to share our Women in Natural Sciences program with you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. How cool to not only hear about the program and the value that it brings to the community and the girls who are involved, but also what an exciting opportunity to learn about the impact that you've had over the 40 years. And I can't wait to hear about the results of your research. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next talk, which is The Future is Female, Preparing Today's Undergraduate Women to be Tomorrow's STEM Leaders. Kata Arango is a director of the McNulty Program for Leadership in Science and Mathematics, as well as an associate professor in the biology department at St. Joseph's University. Her training and expertise range from engineering to microbiology, and with her undergraduate research students, she tries to unveil the mechanisms of gene regulation in the bacterium Cynorhizobium mellilati, a symbiont of legumes. She views leadership like science. It's something that you learn best when you experiment with it. And with her, we'll be speaking Shani Nuckols, who's a manager at the McNulty Program and is responsible for managing program operations as well as organization and implementation of program events, activities, and meetings. Prior to this role, Shani spent more than 10 years in nonprofit development and fundraising. And outside of the office, Shani has served for the past 8 years as a volunteer leader for the New Jersey chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. So Kata and Shani, come on up.
Hi, I'm Kata. I'm Shani. And we are gonna tell you about the McNulty Program for Leadership in Science and Mathematics, a program at St. Joseph's University for female students in STEM. They are all undergraduates, and it's designed to support them throughout their whole 4 years and to catapult them into their STEM profession with the tools that they are going to need to succeed.
We need our slide deck.
Yeah, we need our slide deck.
Do we?
I sent it last night.
Yeah.
Working on, we've got some templates.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, well, we can start while they're
Yeah.
working on it because it's. So I'm sure all of you, because you're here, you're interested in women in science, have heard in the last 10, 15 years how detrimental it is not to have women in leadership positions in all areas of society. But specifically in STEM, this lack of female representation has led to design and implementation of goods and services that do not take into consideration the female conditions, so female anatomy, female behavior, female activities. And as a result, women may have a lower quality of life and even lower safety standards than men. So just an example that I think many of you must be familiar with, for the longest time, seat belts were designed based on the male anatomy, and they were tested based on the male anatomy. And that led to a higher proportion of women being injured or dying in automotive crashes than males. And that changed only recently, maybe 10, 15 years ago. Manufacturers started taking into account not only women's, but child's anatomy, and now they design seat belts with that in mind. Surprisingly, the law hasn't changed. The law does not require these manufacturers to design their belts taking into account females. Oh, there. Okay.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's there. All right. So representation of women in leadership positions in all fields is necessary, but in STEM, it's absolutely critical. And there have been many programs to encourage women to go to college and to obtain advanced degrees, and programs like WIS, which try to encourage younger girls to be excited about STEM. So all of that has resulted in the majority of college graduates being female, and also, surprisingly, the majority of doctorates, including PhDs, medical degrees, etc., are also women. But if we look at STEM in a more narrow perspective, which is not taking into account the biological sciences, the life sciences, and not taking into account health-related professions, the best case scenario is 42 of the math graduates are female. If we look at engineering and we look at computer science, only 25% of graduates are females. And the same happens with the advanced degrees. So in that narrow definition of STEM, Physical sciences graduate, only 36% of the graduates are females. And engineering and computer science is less than 30%. And so what happens with the life sciences and health-related industries, health-related professions? Well, those should be in really good shape, right? Because 61% of bachelor degrees are earned by, in biology and life sciences, are earned by women. Well, if we look at medical school only, the medical profession, 51% of graduates from medical school are female. But when you look at the trajectory in their profession, well, why do only 41% of faculty are women? Why are the majority males? And why are only 36% of the active physicians women? So we see that there's a disconnect between encouraging women and supporting them to go through their training and then what happens in the actual professional career. So what can we do? And why is this happening? What can we do? So we all know that the workplaces, especially in STEM, can be biased against women. They can be hostile to women, or even if not that extreme, there are a lot less opportunities for women to advance in their careers. So we can try to change that system, and we can try to change that culture, and we have done that for years, but it's really slow. In 1970, 8% of the STEM workshop was female. In 2021, in that more narrow definition of STEM, only 28% of the STEM workforce is female. So that is taking too long. We need to do something else. So to help women navigate this system that is biased against them, what can we do? So the Center of Talent Innovation did a study a few years ago, and they looked at what are the characteristics that women that have been successful in STEM have.
Oh, okay.
So they have to exude confidence. They claim credit when it's deserved. They cultivate peer networks. They serve as mentors for other women in STEM. They are true to themselves. And they take pride in their successes, especially if they solve real-world problems. These are problems that help society or others. So some of these are what people call soft skills or professional skills. They are key to leadership. So that means that if we can train women and we can help them develop these traits, we can then increase the presence of women in the workplace that have the traits that will accelerate the cultural change, and it will result in a cycle that will amplify the effect of anything that we do. So that's the reason of the McNulty program to exist. So Shani is going to tell you a little bit about the program itself.
Hi. The John P. McNulty Scholars Program for Excellence in Science and Mathematics was established in 2009 in the College of Arts and Sciences at St. Joseph's University through funding from the John P. and Ann Welsh McNulty Foundation. Ann Welsh McNulty, who's the president of the foundation, spearheaded the effort, which honors the memory of St. Joe's alumnus and Ann's husband, John P. McNulty, from the class of '74. Throughout his career at Goldman Sachs, John was committed to women's achievements and thought that hampering female participation in the workplace harmed society. The original goal of our program was to enhance research and mentoring opportunities for female students in the existing STEM majors at St. Joe's so that they had the tools to become leaders as they progressed through their years. In 2021, we were excited when the McNulty Foundation endowed our program, and with that, we changed the name to the John P. McNulty Program for Leadership in Science and Mathematics, with the primary focus of occupying that special niche of leadership development work that our students need to become change makers in their careers. So here is the mission, the current mission of the McNulty Program, which tells us what drives us is to support women who want to pursue a degree in STEM and then help them become leaders. We aspire for our students to be catalysts for change that contribute to the eradication of bias and discrimination against women in the places that they work. So the McNulty Program welcomed those 3 scholars in 2009, and it has grown to accept an average of 18 new students each year for the last 3 years. During this current year, the 23-24 academic year, we will be serving a total of 41 students in 10 different majors, including biology, chemistry, computer science, mathematics, physics, biochemistry, biomedical science, chemical biology, environmental science, and pharmaceutical chemistry. To appeal to the most promising and brightest STEM high school students, we offer 4-year full and partial tuition scholarships to incoming first-year college students who've been chosen after a rigorous application and selection process that require an additional essay, a separate resume, a separate letter of recommendation, and to those who find themselves in the that the selection committee identifies as most promising an in-person interview on campus. These are our scholars. 48 scholars have been selected over the past 14 years by a committee of faculty and staff that evaluates their applications based on a variety of factors, including but not limited to their academic success and their demonstrated passion for STEM. But we know that we won't always, through this process, recognize first-year applicants with great potential who may demonstrate their qualifications in atypical ways. Some young women need a year or 2 to mature and flourish academically. So to capture those overlooked scholarship applicants, we introduced the fellowship program in 2013 to offer 1-year research fellowships to rising sophomores, juniors, and seniors who are currently St. Joe's students. The McNulty Fellowship Program has welcomed more than 50 students to date, some of whom have reapplied for a 2nd or even 3rd year in the program. And this year we've introduced a new group of students, which we call colloquially continuing fellows. And these are students who are awarded a fellowship in a previous year and either didn't reapply to the program or were not selected for a renewed fellowship. It's important that we keep them engaged in our community and in our programming so they're eligible to continue benefiting from all aspects of the program except for that tuition or fellowship research support. So the program's based on 4 principles, which are right here: research and scholarship, community, mentorship, and leadership development. St. Joe's has a strong and longtime tradition of involving undergraduates in research, most prominently through the Summer Scholars Program, which is a program we work really closely with. A McNulty program can fund a summer of research for our scholars, as well as for those fellows I was telling you about, which encourages students to dive into specific problems in their fields. And our financial support offers them the additional opportunity to travel to national academic conferences to proudly present the results of their work. We have students going to the American Chemical Society Conference. This fall, we have them going to the American Society for Cell Biology, Society for Neuroscience coming up. And just to speak for a minute about community, as we've said and we've heard from our previous presenter, the companionship of women of like minds who share a passion for excellence and for STEM and who may encourage similar challenges along their educational and professional journeys is key to their success. So through a weekly McNulty seminar, we bring our students together. Through peer mentorship and collaborative work in the lab, they build individual connections with each other. We have a dedicated space on campus. We call it McNulty Central, which provides meeting space and quiet study space in a communal atmosphere. And we regularly sponsor both STEM-focused service outreach into the Philadelphia community and also non-STEM social activities for our students in the program to just enhance and build that connection. I should also note that currently we're in the process of formalizing a McNulty alumni network that will continue our students' connection with the program and with each other beyond their time at St. Joe's.
Another cornerstone of our program is mentoring. So we have 2 types of mentoring. Every scholar has a faculty mentor throughout their 4 years, and then also they are part of a peer mentoring pod. So peer mentoring pod is a group of peers, different, a variety of years and majors, and they support each other. And we, as a program, support them, providing workshops for mentoring and for being mentored, so how to lead and how to follow. The most important part of our program is the leadership development, and we've built these on trial and error. And with the change in name and the change in funding structure, we developed a position called the Leadership Fellow, the Leadership Faculty Fellow, and this person is in charge of developing a curriculum for leadership. And we, after trying things for 2 years, we finally came with a curriculum that we are happy with. And we are on the first semester of that, and it's only been 6 weeks, and the students are already raving about it. And it's based on self-knowledge, ethics in leadership, and developing more personal skills and more personal strengths. And our results have been great. When we compare our students, the retention of our students after 12 years with the national average, which is 50%, we realize more than 85% of our students are still in STEM. The ones that graduated 5 years ago, more than 95 of our students are still in STEM. The normal is after 4 years, about 40% of women have switched their field out of STEM. So if you have any questions, you can ask us right now, or you can email us later at McNulty Scholars Program at St. Joe's. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kata and Shani. It's great to learn more about where you're headed in the future and how exciting that so far the response has been great. All right, well, our next talk is going to be about the impacts of the national and local chapters of 500 Women Scientists. And we've got 3 speakers that I'd like to welcome. Tanya Dapkey is an entomologist who's currently working as a section lead at the Academy of Natural Sciences in the Macroinvertebrate Lab at the Patrick Center for Environmental Research. She utilizes STEM outreach activities to bring her love of insects to anyone who will listen. Yay, insects. And in 2017, she co-founded the Philly Pod of 500 Women Scientists and was a member of the National Leadership Board from 2017 to 2020, where she helped to organize over 300 global pods. Locally, Saranya Anantapantula is a high school student at Springford Area High School who has nurtured her love of the environment since she was young. From foraging with her grandmother to creating informational videos to winning awards at international environmental competitions. She's always innovating. She's designed an aquatic robot to monitor water quality and leads a water filter project to provide clean drinking water in India. And her podcast, highlighting women in STEM, dovetails nicely with her book, Gateway to Environmental Solutions. And finally, JoEllen McBride is the Associate Director of the Graduate Student Center at the University of Pennsylvania. Her career path has connected science, communication, and mentorship. She studied how galaxies create stars. She's been a AAAS Mass Media Fellow at the Voice of America, and she now manages the Navigating the Academy programs at Penn. She also serves as Advocacy Director of the 500 Women Scientists Philly Pod, a past member of the WIS Committee on the Status of Women in Astronomy, and the chair of the Education Committee at the American Helicopter Museum. So, Tanya, Saranya, and JoEllen, thank you for talking with us today.
Hi there. Just first, I want to say how wonderful it is to be here, and it's really an honor to be on stage with all of you. So, thank you. So welcome to our talk about the impacts of national and local chapters of 500 Women Scientists. 500 Women Scientists is a global grassroots organization with a mission to make science open, inclusive, and accessible by fighting racism, patriarchy, and oppressive societal norms. Yay. On the evening of the election of November 2016, 5 friends came together to discuss the results. Some of them are in the picture here. It evolved into lots of ideas, but most notably a document, an open letter to all scientists. The letter went live with 500 signatures, and in less than a week later, it had over 1,200. Before we stopped accepting signatures, we got up to about 13,000. So maybe some of you remember this letter, but in the event that you do not, here are some of my personal favorite parts. We, as women scientists, reaffirm our commitment to build a more inclusive society and scientific enterprise. We reject the hateful rhetoric that was given a voice during the U.S. presidential election and which targeted minority groups, women, LGBTQIA, immigrants, and people with disabilities, and attempted to discredit the role of science in our society. Many of us feel personally threatened by this divisive and destructive rhetoric and have turned to each other for understanding, strength, and a path forward. We are members of racial, ethnic, and religious minority groups. We are immigrants. We are people with disabilities. We are LGBTQIA. We are scientists. We are women. These words resonated with many women and gender minorities across the globe. The organization grew exponentially. We used to say, we're building the plane as we're flying it. And as the years progressed, that pledge became action items and fueled the National Leadership Board and local chapters to engage with society to make changes. So programs focus on 3 goals: changing the face of science, holding institutions accountable, and building collective power. To change the face of science, 500 Women Scientists have developed platforms and programs that elevate marginalized groups in sciences, programs like Gauge, Wikiathons, and Fellowship for the Future. To hold institutions accountable, 500 Women Scientists engages the public and policymakers to bring attention to issues that affect women in science. And to build collective power, local chapters called pods encourage members to engage with their local communities. So let's take a closer look at the impact of some of these programs. Gauge started as Request a Woman in STEM. In January of 2018, a platform whose purpose was to re-educate our culture on what a scientist looks like. That first year, nearly 8,000 women and gender diverse folks signed up to be on the platform. Request has been revamped. It is now called Gauge. Gauge is a global search platform where journalists, media outlets, conference planners, and others seeking brilliant voices in science can discover women and gender diverse folks in technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. To date, there are over 15,000 people representing over 140 countries on Gauge, and nearly 2,500 people sign up every year. Wikiathons are a way for members to increase representation in STEM fields by improving and creating pages for women and underrepresented minorities. The 500 Women Scientists Wiki campaign has generated over 871,000 words, 6,500 references, and 355 articles. These have generated over 84 million views. Here's just a breakdown of the number of pages that have been edited through the 500 Women Scientists Wiki campaign. The total number of pages here represents 526, so this is the number of pages that we've edited and created. As you can see, most of the pages are for the English version of Wikipedia. In 4 years, this campaign has increased the number of biographies of women from 17.7 to 19.2%. This is slow progress, but it's progress nonetheless. Fellowship for the Future is a program for women of color by women of color to mentor and support women in STEM. There have been 2 cohorts of scientists in the Fellowship of the Future program, 4 people in 2020 and 5 in 2021. Just an example of what some of those projects are, Rose Bear Don't Walk's project is called Recovering Our Roots, and it's centered on working with the Salish people to revitalize and reintegrate traditional food plant knowledge in the hopes of improving tribal health and cultural longevity. Jessica Chan's project is called Mapping the Extent of the Tar Creek Superfund Site, and it aims to hold the EPA Region 6 office, local politicians, and state-level agencies accountable and spur greater remediation efforts. Holding institutions accountable is the organization's second goal. So in order to accomplish this goal, the projects focus on educating members and the public about policy issues that intersect between science and social justice, such as the impacts of motherhood on scientific careers and reproductive justice. Since the beginning of this organization, there has always been an emphasis on solutions-based workshops and training opportunities, most notably writing opinion pieces and how to engage with your representatives to discuss important policies. To date, pods and leadership board members have written over 25 articles and op-eds published in journals like Scientific American and Nature, and we have had over 40 interviews and mentions in national and international outlets. I actually don't have a metric for how many times we've been to public offices, but I will say we have lobbied together to visit the National Mall in Washington, D.C. A lot of us have visited our state representative. We went to Harrisburg, and of course we've visited our regional and local offices. To build collective power, pods began. So pods are local chapters of 500 Women Scientists. The term pod refers to whale pods, which signify the power of effective teamwork and collaboration. In the beginning, when everything was volunteer hours, we used a Google Drive to organize and communicate with all of the pods. We finally were able to secure some grant money, and it changed the way pods were managed, and thus Orca was created and launched in 2020. To date, there are over 500 pods from 93 countries with over 12,000 registered members on this Orca platform. And I would just argue that not everyone who's in a pod is on this platform. That number is probably at least 5 times as big as that regarding the number of members. For many events in the early years of 500 Women Scientists, so I'm thinking like 2017, 2018, 2019, pod activities were designed and implemented by the leadership team. So as you can see in the graph here, there's a correlation between pod activities and a national campaign. So like March and April 2017 occurred during the March for Science. March and April of 2018 coincided with our Science Salons for Puerto Rico campaign. And in September 2018, pods held screenings of the documentary My Love Affair with the Brain, and where we actually got to interview Geometry. So here's a summary of the programs with the largest impact, but I just want to say additionally, we have an inclusive scientific meeting guide, and the web data there shows that there are 5,300 unique visitors. Our resources page, which has resources on like how to contact your representative, how to write an op-ed, that's have 3,500 unique users, and members or the organization itself have received 4 different awards over the past, since 2017. All right, so now let's hear more about our local chapters here in Pennsylvania.
Sorry. Okay. So the Philly Pod's vision statement is, we stand together to promote STEM education, to support each other in all aspects of our careers, and to advocate for a fact-based public dialogue. And we accomplished this and more during the 4 years that we were active. The Philly Pod promoted science education in their communities by participating in both large and small local events. So tabling has been one of the Philly Pod's most common means of outreach. By tabling, we mean our pod prepares some science activities that are good for people of all ages, and then we get local women scientists to actually do the activity with people. So we've participated in the Franklin Institute's Philly Science Festival every year that it was held, between 2017 and 2021. So obviously it was not held during the pandemic. This festival was a 9-day community-wide celebration of science, and it took place annually in April. And there were lectures, debates, hands-on activities, special exhibitions, and a variety of other informal science education experiences for all ages. The point of the festival was to provide opportunities for all Philadelphians to positively engage with and build a community around science, engineering, and technology. So we were always there, as we always had a table at that. We also had a table at the John Hines Fall Nature Festival and the Pyramid STEM Showcase before the pandemic. Clearly, most of this stuff is before the pandemic. The Franklin Institute's Science After Hours program gave us an opportunity not only to table, but I personally got to give a talk, and I sat on a panel to discuss my career path at the time, from astrophysicist to outpatient surgery magazine editor in 2018. So that was just a great opportunity. Our pod participated in several of the national campaigns that Tanya just mentioned. We held a science salon for Puerto Rico, and we raised over $200 for Ciencia PR. We held a Wikipedia-thon at the Science History Institute, where we created pages for Dr. Ann Rhodes, who is a botanist who worked at the Morris Arboretum here in Philly for over 30 years, Dr. Winifred Hallwax, a tropical ecologist whose work in Costa Rica is considered an exemplar of inclusive conservation, and Lisa Marie Stevens, who managed both the giant panda and primate programs at the Smithsonian Institute's National Zoo. So very important women who had no Wikipedia page about them. We held a screening of My Love Affair with the Brain, the life and science of Marion Diamond, who is a founder of modern neuroscience. And the panel afterwards that we held featured 2 local scientists from Westchester and the Franklin Institute. So advocating for a fact-based public dialogue has also been a very strong component of the pod's vision. We have met with multiple state and federal representatives or their legislative assistants, including Senator Bob Casey in his Philadelphia office, Senator Pat Toomey, yeah, he talked to us in the Philadelphia office. His people, yeah, he did. His people talked to us, yeah. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick in the Newtown office, Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan in her Westchester office, and 7 state representatives during a lobby day in Harrisburg. Our pod also convened a policy workshop with other pods from New York, Pennsylvania, DC, and Maryland to develop one-pagers on climate change, education, and harassment to share with our local and state policymakers. And if you're not clear what a one-pager is, it is a two-sided document that basically shares some background information on a legislative topic, along with either current bills that our pod would want our representative to support, or it can also include proposals for bills that we would like our representative to bring forward. We used these one-pagers when State Senator Katie Muth invited us to lobby in Harrisburg back in like 2019, again, before the pandemic. The one-pagers, we actually expanded them in our pod and wrote 3 more, one on parental leave, one on nuclear power, and one on transportation. We've also partnered with other local organizations in southeastern Pennsylvania, such as Penn Environment and 350.org, and many others to provide testimony at public hearings concerning Pennsylvania K-12 education standards, transitioning the Philadelphia Energy Solutions refinery into a site not dependent on fossil fuels, urging SEPTA to find a sustainable energy source for transit with the Nicetown natural gas plant, urging the city to transition the Philadelphia Gas Works towards sustainable energy, and we also contributed to Philadelphia's climate goals. We've written letters to the editors of local papers, and we've created a Medium blog page to share all of our policy one-pagers and write about other policy issues. Also, some pod members met monthly with other leaders of women's organizations, which was convened by Representative Christy Houlihan, and our members have also been asked by local legislators for input on bills and proposals that they thought our opinion was needed on. And finally, probably the most important thing, which I think everybody else here has touched on, is that our pod members support each other in all aspects of our careers by creating mentoring groups by location and topics. So, for example, in Chester County, which is where I live, we had a group of 4 women who met monthly over 2 years to discuss career and family topics. All of us were making career changes while also starting families, so we discussed everything. Our listserv is still maintained and still active today, and many of our members have made significant career changes and through the networking done in our pod. If any member needs a scientist, pod members have shown up for each other. For example, I oversee the Girls in Science and Technology program at the American Helicopter Museum, and there was one year where every speaker we had come in was from our pod. Also, in 2018, almost every speaker at the Science History Institute Speaker Series was from our pod as well. And we've created and maintained friendships to this day. I know that I continue to benefit from this community, not only personally, but professionally. I developed relationships with my representatives, as well as other local activists. I found a community of women that supported each other, not just in our careers, but in our family experiences as well. Answering questions not just about, say, applying for positions or interviewing, but also sleep training our babies and feeding support. This community has supported me in so many ways. We are always there for each other to fall back on at any time for any situation. But with the uncertainty surrounding the status of the national organization, we are sort of at a standstill right now. So we'd love to connect with any other nonprofit organizations that may have rebranded or reorganized to learn about different strategies. Okay, I'm running late.
So now the Philly pod has not only done a lot to make Philly female scientists feel empowered, but they've given way for local chapters to thrive. The Phoenixville pod is just that. So when I was younger, I used to live near Flint, Michigan. My friends used to live in Flint, and their families were greatly affected by its water crisis. I saw how a community was not made aware of the changes that were happening, and specifically the effects on their health. So later on, when I read a great book by Mona Hanna-Attisha on the Flint water crisis in 2019, I felt inspired to create an active scientific community to foster a platform that would address environmental issues, spotlight innovative solutions, and emphasize the importance of community involvement in environmental protection. So with a lot of support from Tanya and the Philly pod, I started the 500 Women Scientists Phoenixville pod. My goals were to do 3 things: amplify resilient voices in environmental sciences, provide education in STEM-related subjects, and foster global connections to promote interdisciplinary approach towards solving environmental issues. So actually using the 500 Women Scientists Gauge program, I connected with various female scientists, such as Dr. Laura Guertin, to simply interview them and learn what it meant to be a female scientist, specifically in environmental sciences. Now, I was inspired by their stories, and thus the podcast, Women in Environmental Science and Engineering, began in order to share and communicate current science in an inspiring and an interactive way with the public. The impact has been outstanding, with over 12,000 listeners from over 110 countries. Now, with the joint venture with For a Green Environment, which is my nonprofit to provide STEM education, we've been supporting underrepresented students and their education during COVID-19 with coding and math classes, to supporting Boys and Girls Centers in North Penn and New York, to supporting extremely motivated students interested in STEM in Jamaica. Now, third, because I saw myself combining my passions of mine, for example, hiking and cooking to make foraging, I wanted to foster an interdisciplinary approach to exploring environmental issues. So as a subset of the podcast, I wrote a book detailing various aspects of environmental science, specifically the journey from qualitative studies in communities to seeing an environmental problem, to conducting scientific research, be it in a lab or a field, to engineering a solution and then using public policy and community outreach to actually implement that solution. We took these ideas to the United States Earth Science Organization, where some of the people I interviewed for the podcast and I collaborated. Our goal was not to influence students to study environmental or earth science, but to show how they can utilize their interests in anything ranging from computer science to business to benefit the environment and solve our global challenges. Now, after a qualitative study of the students, it was determined that they could fully articulate how their current areas of interests could be related to environmental studies. Now, the future is always uncertain, but for nonprofit organizations, there's one major predictor, that's funding. At this time, there are no large grant awards or foundational support for 500 women scientists. The organization can keep the lights on for a little while, but the future isn't looking as productive as it has been. Foundations and philanthropy no longer want to support operations. They want a shiny new thing. The inability of philanthropic organizations to recognize operational needs of nonprofits is pushing our nonprofits to extinction. Without funding to support full-time staff, operations become volunteer-based. And if anyone here has volunteered at a nonprofit, you understand this image and feel the burnout deep in your bones. This work is essential for all of us to feel included, acknowledged, and valued in our community. But I also wonder why this work requires us to scream just to be heard. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. I can say that it's been an honor and delight to be involved with your activities, and I look forward to our conversation to see how we can support the strength of our local community, or local pods. Okay, and then finally, our last but not least speaker will talk about embracing a creative arts identity as a female scientist. Laura Guertin is a distinguished professor of earth science at Penn State Brandywine. Her research explores innovative and effective uses of new and emerging technologies to enhance teaching and student learning in the introductory level college classroom. Most recently, looking at how student-generated audio narratives help students form a stronger science identity. And with a passion for science outreach, she taps into creative approaches such as quilting to engage audiences in learning about earth science and its applications. Laura?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am very excited to take you on a journey with me. This is not a journey about how I became interested in science and how I became a scientist. What I'd like to do today is to share with you how I have connected my creative side, my creative identity, and I would like us to elevate and celebrate that and talk to you how it's been coming from a science background and then being able to share the creative side. So here we go. And I'm going to take you back in time with me. That is me as a junior Girl Scout in the 5th grade. In the 5th grade, we were working on the sewing badge. And to do the sewing badge, you had to crochet a pot holder. So this is when I first learned how to crochet. And it was a pot holder at the end, but it was more a trapezoid instead of a square. But I did earn the badge in the end. But then I never crocheted after that because I got the badge, I was happy, we've moved on, and I was not really engaged in any kind of creative hobbies. I don't know how many of you, when you were in the 7th grade, you had to sew an animal pillow, maybe in your sewing classes. I can tell by the laughter, some of you have. Maybe you did an elephant or you did a bear, but I did the bunny as my sewing pillow. But then, after junior high school, didn't sew after that either. Continued on as a scientist and as an undergraduate major in geology, and I have a PhD in marine geology and geophysics. But that last year of graduate school, I have to tell you, I was at University of Miami, and it's intense for those of us that have been through there. You're trying to write the chapters in your dissertation, you've got that last minute data you're trying to pull together, and the stress level was amazingly high that last year of graduate school, and I needed to find a way to step away and decompress and just get rid of that stress. And so there was a Michael's Arts and Crafts store that was near, and so I went there, and they have everything. And the first thing that caught my eye was the paint by number. And I was like, oh, I can do this, paint by number, that's easy. But then when you're so stressed out, trying to stay inside the lines was not so easy. So I got even more stressed. I was like, okay, scrap this, back to Michael's. And we get to Michael's, and then they had this amazing aisle of all this yarn, and they had some crochet hooks hanging there. And I'm like, wait a minute, I bet I could figure this out. And so I grabbed some yarn, and I grabbed a crochet hook, and sure enough, by the time I defended my dissertation, I had a scarf. Now, don't look at it too closely, though, because it's 2 different weights of yarn that I actually put together, and the edges aren't that even. And I was at University of Miami in Florida, so I didn't really need a scarf down there either. But I was so happy that I had it. And interestingly, because it did, I was able to acknowledge that it provided me that offset and that balance from my science side, that it was really good to bring in some creative side to decompress and really kind of balance out my identity. And so I continued to crochet blankets for friends or for nonprofit organizations like Project Blindness, and it was a lot of fun. Fast forward to New Year's Day in 2017. I was on Twitter and I saw this. So this is called a temperature blanket. So what a temperature blanket is, it's 365 rows, and each row is crocheted or knitted in a color of what the maximum temperature was for that day. So depending upon the location you're at, you would track how high the temperature got. And so if the temperature was between 90 and 100 degrees, maybe you crocheted a row in the color red. And if it was between 80 and 90, maybe you crocheted in orange. So the Roy Javiv color scheme is commonly used. And you could have an entire blanket by the end of the year. And for me, I'm looking at this as a data visualization, right? Your science side cannot escape this whatsoever. And I was like, this is amazing. And so 2017, my New Year's resolution was like, I'm going to do something like this. But a blanket was pretty intimidating, so I stuck with what I know, which is scarves. And so then this kind of became my go-to gift for friends too. So this particular scarf I'm showing you is one that I crocheted for the chancellor of my campus on the 1-year anniversary of her being our chancellor. So what I did was I started marking the temperature at Penn State Brandywine for an entire year. Gave her this scarf, which she loved, and she said, I'm going to wear this. And what I secretly did was, because there's a whole science backstory behind it, I turned her into a science communicator. So she was able to then explain what went into the scarf, which was just wonderful. So I started thinking of what are different ways to merge the science and looking at this creative way to share information. And that same year in 2017, I actually brought it into my classroom as well. So I teach introductory level earth science courses for non-STEM majors. And I'm always looking for a way to make sure they're not intimidated by data, that they don't shut down as soon as I show them a graph, like the 3 graphs you see here on this poster. And so being so super excited about that temperature blanket, I started crocheting, I called them temperature tapestries because they're smaller than a scarf, not as big as a blanket. But what we did was, as a class, we were looking at what was the temperature in Philadelphia in 2017, that spring semester, but also 50 years before that in 1967 and before that in 1917. And so instead of introducing my lessons to students with graphs and data, I have now shifted into finding, can I use yarn? Can I use fabric? Are there other ways to start the conversations to bring them on board? And what I decided to do then, just because the students responded so positively to this, when I showed them these stripes, if you will, they could immediately make observations. They could say, oh yes, it was warmer in February because we could practice outdoors as a baseball team and we had never done that before. And immediately they can make connections to their lives. So yay for yarn. But I wanted to share this also with my geoscience colleagues. And so this was the tipping mark for me. As you can see here, this is a poster that you would typically present at a scientific conference. And each year I present at the American Geophysical Union annual meeting. It's a conference that brings together 25,000 Earth and space scientists from across the globe, presenting on everything from volcanology to research in the cryosphere, and they do have a geoscience education section at the conference. Being a female in the geosciences, I have had my challenges, as I know many women in STEM have had. In the geosciences especially though, displaying or showing a feminine side or embracing female traits is criticized, not just by men, but also other female geoscientists as well. So everything from you can't wear nail polish and makeup if you're a female geoscientist, because then you're not taken seriously. And so me bringing yarn to a professional conference, I was scared a lot because I didn't know how I would be viewed or how I would be looked at putting something like this on there. I will say though, thankfully, all my fears just disintegrated. This poster had the most visitors I have ever had at a scientific conference. There were over 100 people that came by in a 2-hour time slot. And they were petting my poster. They all wanted to touch the yarn. So I've never had that. But I also had an amazing number of male colleagues, in addition to female colleagues, coming and talking about how their grandmother had sewed or crocheted, and could you do this in cross stitch? Could you use precipitation data? What about stream flow numbers? And so there was such rich conversations, and it was an enormous relief that I felt that I was accepted for being able to share this, and it just motivated me to spring further with this. So I want to bring in now my sewing side. And so I hadn't done anything since that pillow back in the 7th grade. My grandmother, though, was a crocheter, as was I, and so my grandmother and I had connected a lot. As I was going through graduate school, she didn't really understand that marine geology and geophysics part, but when we connected on the phone or when I visited her, we could always share crocheting stories or techniques. When she passed on in 2006, the family felt I should get her sewing machine. She was a sewer, I was not. And she just did some basic sewing. You could see her, this is not her original sewing machine, obviously, but it's a Kenmore machine. She bought it at Sears, and so it did the basic stitches and did everything that you needed on there. And so when the family gave me this machine, I really felt that I needed to do something with it in honor of my grandmother, in honor of also continuing to expand my toolkit of creative approaches. So I went to JoEllen Fabrics, which offers the quilting classes, and learned how to quilt. Now I'm going to jump to 2018. In March of 2018, I attended a conference at the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium. It's down in the Louisiana Bayou in Cocotree, Louisiana, where they brought together scientists and science communicators for an event they called Ocean.com, and the theme of the event was coastal optimism. They unveiled this theme at the conference, and we were all like, ooh, ah. Then we were scratching our heads, what's coastal optimism? And so what they were doing is trying to have us find ways to tell the stories of adaptation and resilience. The media is filled with the negative stories. And yes, sea level is rising, and you've got your shoreline sinking and sediment diversion. There's a lot that's happening, but not everyone can pick up and leave from their homes. And so there are things people are doing in place. So we toured a lot of the areas and saw these ghost forests, and we saw how almost all the structures and homes are built up on stilts because of the constant flooding that's going on from these storms. But then we saw some really creative innovations going on. So when levees are built in some of the areas, I had never seen this, that they're building gates into the levees that can open and close to allow fish and other organisms to exchange on the back side and the front side of the levee. So you don't isolate these ecosystems and develop two different environments. So you can get a free flow of exchange. I was like, wow, that's pretty creative with engineering. And then the Christmas tree story, oh my goodness, this was amazing. So this is a great way where they involve the entire community to come together at the end of the holidays, because it's time for everyone to discard their trees, but what they do is they put them in these pens that are parallel to the shoreline, and they get the Louisiana National Guard to help out. And what these dead trees do is they eliminate the energy from the storm surge, they'll trap sediment, and it's significantly slowing down erosion behind there. So I'm leaving Louisiana with all these great stories, and I'm like, I've got to find a way. And I was trying to think, can I crochet this? This is like a lot to crochet. But then I'm thinking, well, what can I do? What can I do? And then it's a long flight home because there's always flight delays when you're coming in and out of Philadelphia. And so I get home and I'm like dragging myself through my dining room, and there's the sewing machine. And I was like, oh, what if I tried to quilt some science stories, some stories about the Louisiana coast. And so that is what led to my collection of Stitching Hope for the Louisiana Coast. The first quilt I made is this Christmas tree one. So look at this as a time series from the top going down, where you see a lot of shoreline and not much ocean, but in time you're seeing less and less of the land because of water advancing. Then you've got these Christmas tree pens, and then you still see a little bit of land loss, but not as much as you did above. So this was my first science storytelling quilt that I did. And I enjoyed it so much that I decided to do 8 others. And so I have a whole collection for Stitching Hope on the Louisiana coast. It was on display at Jenkins Arboretum last year, which I was excited to be able to share that. And I had so much fun doing that I then did a series of mini quilts on climate change solutions. And they're all based upon Project Drawdown's recommendations on what we can do in the transportation sector and the agriculture sector. So I've got those. And then last year, I was able to go out to sea for 2 months. Yeah, 2 months. We left out of Cape Town, South Africa, and on this ship, the JoEllen Resolution, which is a scientific research vessel, we went out and we were collecting deep sea sediments and core samples. And what I decided to do is also do a quilt collection to help try to share and communicate what we did on the ship. And I got very excited, maybe a little too excited. There are 19 quilts in this collection that reflect the 19 windows you see across the bridge there, so they're all different views into what we did at sea. And this particular quilt is actually a data visualization. It's showing you the differences in air and sea temperature going across time there. And I just love batik fabrics, by the way, so that's why that one's there. This is another quilt showing work and life balance. It's in a traditional type of quilting format. Some of the quilts in the collection I've also kind of gamified a little bit and made them into puzzles. So this is an unsolved Sudoku puzzle. You can solve it, but instead of numbers 1 through 9, it's the names of the different types of research labs like sedimentology and petrology. So you learn a little bit more about the labs when you solve the puzzle. And then I think I've reached the ultimate goal where I've combined quilting and crocheting into one piece. And this piece is actually on display currently at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum down in St. Michael's in Maryland. They have an exhibit right now that is called The Changing Chesapeake and looking at climate impacts in Chesapeake Bay region. So this is called Looking Out at the Ghosts of the Coast. And when I first quilted it, it didn't look enough of a window to me. I'm like, how do you make something look like a window? You put curtains on it. So that's what I did there. And just a shout out to all the other people that are expanding the definition of what is a quilt and broadening the participation of who gets to quilt. What I'm doing is unique to me, but it's not unique to the greater community, where there are people that are bringing women into wood shops and having them make wooden blocks that are put together in a quilt, where they are bringing computer programmers, so tech teenagers and non-tech grandmothers coming together to use computers to design patterns that are then made into quilts, digital quilts that are done, all different wonderful opportunities where we are broadening the participation of who is a quilter and also redefining what makes a quilt. So just to wrap up, I will say, I'm super excited to be a science quilter. I embrace that identity, and I still feel that I am a scientist and I am not discredited. And it may sound silly to you, but for me, the anxiety of really showing that I have a creative side and I can still be a scientist was a lot. Doing these quilts has allowed me to really go above and beyond my science communication and my outreach goals in getting any and every person that wants to learn about science or help them see the connections to science to their own lives. Quilts are very inviting. They're a generational feature. I haven't heard anyone say they're scared of a blanket before, so it's a wonderful doorway and opportunity to talk to people. Amazingly, so I'm at Penn State, a Research One institution, and my institution loves me doing this quilting because I've had more invited talks. I'm getting out in the community more, which helps them, of course. But I will say that I am in a position of privilege where I do have tenure. And so because I already have tenure, I feel very comfortable doing this. If I was pre-tenure, I will be honest, there's no way I would even bring a quilt out. I will say, interestingly though, I do suffer from a little bit of imposter syndrome, not as a scientist, but as a quilter. So I've started joining quilting guilds so I can learn some more techniques, and they do these show and tells, and I'm like, I got this quilt. Yeah, don't look too close at the stitching. But it's amazing. And by the way, this quilt actually is done in binary code. So the blue and red represent the hull of the ship that I was on, and it actually spells out fair winds and following seas as a tribute to the quilt. Yeah. So that is just a really rough summary of my work. And I actually did bring a couple of quilts with me. So if during the break, if any of you would like to see some of the quilts, I've got them over by my seat there. And if you'd like to see the quilts, all the quilts I have online, if you scan that code, you'll be able to go to my website and you can take a look at them. And thank you so much for your time today and hearing my story.
Thank you so much, Laura. I feel like your story really encapsulates a lot of the themes that we heard from all of the speakers around how being your true self has both advanced your own career as well as science communication and community understanding of science. So I would welcome folks to raise your hands if you have questions here. I'm not how do we know if there are questions online?
We'll check.
Okay, great. So while you're thinking, or while we're waiting to hear from questions online, I'll kick us off with our first question. What was interesting to me is hearing our first two talks talking about local programs that are institutionally supported, and our second two talks really focusing on more grassroots or individual efforts. And I think there are opportunities and constraints for both approaches. And I'd love to hear from both perspectives. If you're more on the grassroots side, what do you hope can maybe find its way into institutional support? And from the other side, for those of you who have been working on these long-standing institutional programs, where do you see your students and alumni sort of carrying on the learnings from your programs as a more individuals and grassroots efforts moving forward? So who wants to tackle that first? Feel free to grab a mic and jump into the conversation. Go ahead, Kata. And yeah, let's do the mics just so folks online can hear.
It's on, right? Yes. So that is the whole purpose of our program, actually. So we want our students to go out into the workspace or go out into grad school and bring that strength with them. And we want them to mentor other women so that other women can also develop those skills. And we want our program to multiply the effects once our students go out after they graduate.
And just to add to that, we have had stories from some of our alums who've gone on to pursue advanced degrees where they have founded their own communities of women pursuing the same degree so that they're coming together beyond St. Joe's and starting their own support networks.
From our perspective, like starting with youth, a big goal of the WINS program is to take our model that has been successful for so many years now and begin to share it out with other youth programs, in STEM especially, but not necessarily just in STEM, just to recognize the value of out-of-school time programs in general, and what are the things that have made our program successful and how other programs can adopt those to help build their strength in their programs, but also build their programs so that they get more support for funders and stuff so that their programs can grow as well. So, because there's not enough of us. There's a lot of us, but there's still not enough, so.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, from our perspective, our whole goal is to educate every single member that we have on how they can be leaders, how they can find their voice, how they can do that. So we're doing what WINS does, but for, women all over the place. But WINS is the thing that I think is going to work the best. Your types of programs are what we need. You have support, you have financial support, you have institutional support, and you're in the places where those students need you to be. We're trying to be everywhere and we can't because there's just so many of us. But what we would love to see is those women that you go through your program become leaders, and then they can enact those changes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to just jump right in. Hi, I'm Linda Kennedy from Intrepid Museum, and we have a long-standing girls and STEM program. Now, we have always, just if you identify as a girl, if you are a girl, you're a girl, we take you in. But I heard one of the groups mention gender diversity, and I was wondering how people are handling now someone who is born female, who may no longer identify female, or is completely non-binary. How do you welcome them into your group? Are you welcoming them into your program?
You're welcome, period.
Yeah.
There's nothing else needs to be said. You belong.
Is that true across the board?
So yes, it is true. We haven't necessarily experienced significant numbers of that. Sometimes we don't necessarily know where people identify. It's up to them to choose. And at a young age, yes, we're in a world where we're becoming more accepting, but still at that young age, it really varies on how comfortable a young person might feel sharing that with themselves. We are welcoming. We have never excluded anyone that has identified otherwise. We actually, if you identify as female, was one of the things that we thought about, but we might have students that might be non-binary. We just want to create a safe space. And the reality is that our program might be a place where it's the only place that they feel safe if they don't have supports outside of it. So we try to be very mindful of that. And again, really just trying to create an inclusive environment for everyone that wants to be there, so.
Just to follow up, because I hear language like sisters and this kind of overtly feminine language that I'm using, I'm curious.
Yeah, so the WINS program, that is a key thing. And again, like when the foundation of the program started, of course, it was to focus on building that strength for women in STEM. And again, even then when there wasn't necessarily a language or even acceptance at the time when the program was started, as we progress through these things, we do try to be mindful within the program itself. Like sometimes we would say girls, but now we say, we call them WINS, or we say, hey, everyone. Like we try to think about the way that we're even expressing how we communicate with them. But one of the things that I will say that has been very beneficial for the program and for the students that are in it is that they appreciate that regardless of where they are in their journeys, they know that they feel safe and they feel accepted regardless. Did you want to add to that?
Did you want to?
Okay.
Oh, did you want to add something?
Yes, so we have had students that identify themselves with pronouns they and them, and St. Joseph's is a very welcoming environment for diverse gender identities. So it doesn't feel like they are felt uncomfortable. We've always tried to be very inclusive, but specifically for for the people who apply to the program, we are very specific in saying that you're a woman or identify as a woman. We have not had anybody who has transitioned from male to female apply to our program, so we haven't actually had to navigate that, but we are getting ourselves ready for when that happens, because it is going to happen.
And likewise, similar for us, we haven't actually had that occur. There was at one point one student who applied who they were very open about that, and we accepted them, but they chose to participate in another opportunity. So
Yeah, and I'll just follow up with that it was a conversation that we had. In the very beginning, I had a trans volunteer in one of my labs, and they wanted to join, and I was like, I don't know. And so it spurned this conversation with us that it doesn't matter. If you're a gender minority, you belong.
Thank you. Do we have another question from the audience?
Hello. Okay, so I'm really excited. I work at the Science History Institute, so I know a lot of yous. I've seen a lot of yous. I love the quilts. I'm really curious about how formal institutions like museums, libraries, things like that can support programs like this, because I think you all are doing such excellent, incredible work. And so I'm just curious about ways that maybe from your perspective, you're like, oh, we could really use X, and that would be super helpful.
Mine too. I haven't thought that far ahead. I think right now we just, we want to maintain that we have a network of women, and knowing that like you are a resource and that you are a partner for us, and that if anyone needs anything, you contact us, we spread out the word. Like that's what we need from you, is just knowing that you're there and that we can call on you or you can call on us, and that, we're in the network together. If I come up with a more concrete answer, I'm totally giving you a call.
I think that's a great setup for another question that I had in my head, though, which is that one of the benefits of focusing on a local physical community is the opportunity for partnerships. And many of you spoke about some of the collaborations that you've had, but how does that, how do you maybe network with other programs so that we're all kind of working together towards supporting women in science rather than reinventing the wheel?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talk about that a lot. Like, we don't want to, exactly, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to double the efforts. You want to make sure that you're getting together. And we were hoping that, platforms like Gauge or our Google group or, just would be a way to do that. I don't know if I have a better answer.
Do. Yes. So one of the things I did as the 500 Women Scientists advocacy person for our pod was I actually reached out to other local climate organizations and just said, hey, we exist, guys. If you need us, let me know. And actually that worked really well, because we got people from Penn Environment reached out to us and asked us to go lobby with them. We got 350.org asked us to be to do some of the testimonies that I said in our thing. So it was just letting them know that we're here and that they can use us. They don't have to go out and try to find a woman scientist or somebody who knows something about climate change. We actually had a bunch in our pod that gave all those testimonies. I didn't give any of those testimonies. Those were all somebody else in our pod, because they were an environmental scientist and they could do that. So it was just letting them know that we're there, and then the collaboration just sort of came out of that.
We collaborate with other McNulty programs. There are 3 McNulty programs for undergrads in the area. There's Ann Welsh McNulty Program for Leadership of Women at Villanova, and there's another McNulty Program for Women in Science at Hunter College. And we exchange ideas, we exchange tips. We've tried to organize things together. It has not worked thus far, but so those are some that we have immediately reached out to because we have that connection. But in the past, we worked with the Philadelphia Science Festival, the Wagner Institute for Science, and others, so that our students could go do science outreach.
A couple of ways. One, I don't want to say the low-hanging fruit, but just tapping into the alumna network, because many of our alumna are local, and so it's really nice to be able to have WINs connect with other WINs who are out in the workforce and in their industries already. But we also make an effort to connect with other youth groups regardless of girls, boys, whatever. So we try to connect with other youth groups and just try to allow our youth to see that there are other youth doing really great things, and just this concept of youth elevating youth and youth empowering each other, and giving platforms to youth so that adults can see what youth are doing and go out of their way to support youth, because again, there's a lot of us, but there's not enough of us. We really need to be there for our youth. So
I mean, even just from this conversation, I'm imagining some like cool cross-pollination of how the leadership, exercises that you're developing filter down into high school programs, and that gets worked into advocacy and creative outlets. So I think there's lots of really cool opportunities to learn from each other.
I just want to make a quick comment about the creative outlet. So it's been interesting for me because I would love to get my quilts out and share them with even more people. And some of the audiences I have been able to tap into, which I didn't expect, is the Amish community in Lancaster, because a couple of my quilts, I needed help with long arm quilting out in Lancaster, and some Amish women have been doing some of the hand stitching, and so they learned that there's a woman that goes on the ocean and she quilts, and one of them apparently started crying when she realized that she was contributing to this, and so never thought I'd be a hit with the Amish community on this, but there's so many events though that are either science events or they're art events, and so for some events, I don't fit in as a scientist because I have this creative thing. I mean, that's not science research, so I will not get accepted or I won't get funding for it. But then I'm also not an artist, and so there's art displays that are at libraries or museums and such, and so my work doesn't qualify for that because it's not fine art either. And so we're working on it, obviously bridging, I think, definitions and identities, but I think there's still a way to go where you don't have to be one or the other, you can be both. And again, just because of what the overarching objective is to really improving the science literacy of all.
I love that. Other questions from the audience?
Yeah, actually, I have a question. And maybe this is for Saranya and Janae, since you haven't had a chance to say much in this conversation. Would kind of love to hear from you about how you found, in Saranya, the 500 Women Scientists, and Janae, the WINS program. And then based on your experiences with those programs, what recommendations you would make for younger women now who are looking to get tapped into the scientific community in Philadelphia?
So I was nominated for WIN.
That one's, try the other one. Some of the mics are a little funky today.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I was nominated for WINS by my science teacher, which is really great because she was a Black woman, and it gave me a different idea already of what a scientist was, because at first, I'm thinking a scientist is a white man, older, glasses. But then, going through the process of interviewing for WINS and just being able to participate with a group of young women who were like-minded and liked the same thing as me was really nice, especially being from the community that I'm from. Science and, going hiking and doing all of kayaking and swimming and all types of stuff is just not something that people, or at least a lot of my friends, were doing. And I love that I'm able to be a vessel for my friends to go camp and pitch tents and kayak and do all of those things that I love to do. And I'm very biased. I think that WINS is the best program in the world. But I also think that everyone who has come through the program, whether they finish the program or not, they have great things to say. And I think that I can, attest to the positions that I was put in because of WINS. And, I'm definitely an art girl. Like that I'm on that side, but I'm also able to appreciate science. And that has helped me make my way back,
So for me, I kind of got into science and contacting women scientists because I didn't know about programs like WINS, and I didn't know how exactly I could contribute to because I was interested in environmental science, how I could contribute to environmental science. No one in my family had done that. That wasn't something we normally discussed. It was either doctor or law or computer scientist. So it was kind of difficult to get into environmental science, and that's why I'm so glad things like 500 Women Scientists existed for me, because then I was able to transfer my confusion into learning more and seeing like how impactful it is to share with other people the same information I'm getting, because there's probably someone else out there just like me who doesn't know about programs that are available to them, but still want to pursue environmental science. Now, because of these conversations I've had with a lot of the people I've talked to, formally, informally, through the podcast, or just after a conference or something, probably like now, what I'm learning is there's so many aspects to the environment. There's so many ways I can transfer something I'm interested in into solving a global issue, and I'm really excited to continue pursuing this. And yeah.
So I think we're at time. So
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to give all of our speakers a chance to. Sorry.
Oh, there was
If
one
you have
more.
more time, can we sneak in one last question?
Okay, very quickly. Here, I'm coming to you.
Laura, hello. I want to respectfully disagree. You are an artist. And I'm retired from an art museum background. I had to force myself to come to Women in Science. You spoke eloquently, poignantly about if you were not tenured, what kind of prejudice you would hit from science people. Well, I want to speak the kind of prejudice that art people have towards science. And I would love to see your work in one of the galleries in town or someplace, because hearing that kind of, that you face, but I know the closed-mindedness of the arts community just as well. So thank you. You've changed me, because I said, women in science, I'm art, that music. Thank you. And you're an artist.
Wow, well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Laura, for bridging these boundaries. And I think, just our conversation today, hearing from you, hearing from, our alumna, and those who are doing the work right now, I think we can see the impact that these programs have on us as individuals. And looking at the 40-plus year legacy of WINS and the future, I think it's really exciting to see how the landscape is shifting. And hopefully, when we're here, 10 years from now, or maybe 40 years from now, maybe the conversation will be entirely different because of the work that all of you are doing today.